Well, there was a recent poll, I forget, who conducted it, but apparently immigration is the #1 issue for Latinos. I think 51% said immigration is their #1 issue. I think jobs in the economy were about 35%, and behind that you had education. So if the polls are right, then, my hope is that Latinos will get out and vote. I think the President's announcement on June 15th allowing these kids to come forward and apply for deferred action is hugely important. These kids have been living in the shadows for a long, long time. Finally, there's a ray of sunshine through those dark clouds. I think, the administration has thrown them a lifeline. They can now get a work permit. With a work permit in the state of Florida, they can apply for a driver's license. And it's hard for me to imagine that in the future, we're not going to be able to get the DREAM Act passed. And I can't imagine that whoever is president, that they're going to tell these kids who now have a temporary reprieve that they're taking it away. I just can't imagine that at all. I mean, these kids are so amazing, and they've accomplished so much despite so many obstacles. I think the train has left the station, frankly, and I look forward to the day when these kids are able to get their green cards and eventually become U.S. citizens. In 2008, when Obama was running for president, the Latino vote was hugely important. I think he won 4 swing states, in large part thanks to the Latino vote, states that were red that turned blue. Many Latinos and other folks have been pretty disappointed by the fact that this administration has detained and deported a record number of people these past few years. However, having said that, on June 15th, the president did announce that, he was throwing Dreamers a lifeline, so that's a good thing. Romney, on the other hand, when he was interviewed recently in Univision by Jorge Ramos, he does not support the DREAM Act. He referred to immigrants as illegal aliens. He thinks that the Arizona bill is a model. And he thinks that people should self-deport and, just go to the back of the line. What line is what, many immigrants ask me. Where's the line? I want to be there. So do I think that there's hope for the future? I do. I think that the Latino vote is so increasingly important that to ignore it in this election and certainly in the next would be a huge mistake. I think it would be political suicide. I can tell you that people like Jeb Bush are beside themselves, I think, given some of the positions that some Republicans have taken on immigration. Lamar Smith, who heads the House Judiciary Committee, has proposed a bill. I think it's called the HALT bill. Which would take away the administration's discretionary authority until Obama's no longer around. So it's very partisan. I think many folks have not been happy with what the Obama administration has done on enforcement. They're not happy with what they're hearing from a lot of the Republican leadership. But at the end of the day, it's all about votes. And if in fact, Latinos vote in anywhere near the kind of numbers they did in 2008, I think that, I think politicians are going to have to take note. Now, whether Latinos are going to vote in the kind of numbers that they did before remains to be seen. I mean, that was a historic election, and you may not see that kind of turnout this time around. The tone of the rhetoric, honestly, I mean, it's toxic, and people feel passionately whichever position they take. But you've got groups like FAIR, I think it's Numbers USA, and few groups like that who have an awful lot of resources, an awful lot of power, and do a great job of getting their message out. Unfortunately, many of us think that there's a lot of disinformation getting out there, and groups like ours need to be doing a better job of getting our message out. We're in a period in our history where, look, the economy, is not doing well, and that tends to bring out the worst in people. You had the Oklahoma City bombing, and then after that, you had 9/11. So is it surprising that we're hearing a lot of anti-immigrant rhetoric these days? I don't think it is. My hope is that moving forward, we're going to get beyond this. Whether it's strictly for political reasons or that people understand the smart thing to do is to get a good comprehensive immigration reform bill passed. 500 scholars a couple of years ago wrote the president and said immigration is the best anti-poverty program ever devised. When Alan Greenspan was head of the Federal Reserve, he said even undocumented immigrants contribute a great deal to the economy. With many baby boomers like me going to be retiring in the near future, we need immigrants here contributing to the economy more than ever. And I just, what I tell, the dreamers, we represented the 4 kids that walked from Miami to Washington, D.C. to call attention to the need for the DREAM Act. And one of the things that so amazed me was, they educated people. They didn't have horns and a tail. People put a face in the issue. And I think, so many more people understood at the end of the day, why this was a good thing, not a bad thing. And I get calls all the time from people who say, my neighbor, the person who sits next to me in the church pew, my nanny, this has just happened to them, what can I do? Well, what I tell these people is, you need to understand that we need people like you to be getting involved, to try to make a difference. Because the folks, many of the folks who want very restrictive immigration laws do a pretty darn good job of getting their voices heard and calling their members of Congress and letting people know how unhappy they are if the president does something like he did on June 15th. People need to get mobilized. They need to step up to the plate and try to make a difference. But it's important for groups like ours and others to educate people about what we see as the issue and why we think people should care and why we think immigration is a good thing and not a bad thing. When Chertoff was head of DHS, he said, his agents were spending all their time going after maids and landscapers instead of the drug dealers and the terrorists. We're far better off knowing who people are and where they are. We're wasting precious resources targeting the wrong people. We're spending billions of dollars detaining people who've lived here for years, worked hard, paid taxes, and have U.S. citizen children with no criminal history. What's wrong with this picture? Everything.